The morning sun embraced the countryside where Zach and his family lived. Their farmhouse stood peacefully in the warm glow of dawn, a quiet refuge from the world. Life felt simple and perfect, each day beginning with calm and harmony. The father, a man of deep love and wisdom, had 2 sons. The elder, loyal and hardworking, valued duty and honor, while the younger Zach was restless and longed for freedom and adventure. Though the father loved both deeply, he knew each had to follow his own path. Though Zach's home was filled with love and comfort, his gaze often lingered on the horizon. The life he knew felt small and too familiar, almost like a cage. He dreamed of more than the routine of farm life. He longed for adventure, excitement, and the freedom of the world beyond. His father knew that words alone could not hold his son's heart in place. One day, he would ask for freedom. Unable to hold back any longer, Zach finally mustered the courage to ask his father for his inheritance, his voice a mix of excitement and hesitation. The world beyond was no longer just a dream. It had become a calling, urging him on a journey he could no longer resist. The elder son felt deep frustration as his father agreed to give away half their inheritance. He couldn't understand why his father would reward Zach's reckless choice to leave. With quiet resolve, the father handed half their inheritance to Zach. With a silent prayer, he shared a few final words, hoping the journey would one day lead his son back home. With a final backward glance, Zach set off toward the horizon. The father stood at the edge of the field, watching as Zach walked away. His heart ached, but he remained silent, holding on to hope that one day the same road would bring his son back home. Zach set off down the dusty road, his heart brimming with anticipation. As his father's home faded behind him, he felt the thrill of a new beginning. The world stretched out before him, full of promise, adventure, freedom, and everything he had ever desired. In the city, the nights were long, the lights bright, and he believed his fortune would bring him a new life full of friends and excitement. For a time, he lived as if nothing else mattered. Free from his father's rules, Zach felt on top of the world. The pulsing music, flashing lights, and wild energy of the night were unlike anything he had experienced. Everything was new. The thrill of the crowd, the rhythm, the endless laughter and movement. He was enjoying himself. Zach sat amidst laughter and celebration, surrounded by new companions who raised their glasses in his honor. In that moment, everything felt perfect. Joy, freedom, and the thrill of adventure. Zach smiled. He had found his people. With his fortune in hand, Zach gambled freely, believing luck was on his side. Every roll of the dice felt like another chance to win it all. Zach was drawn deeper into the allure of the world around him, strangers' laughter, and the beauties who surrounded him. Their warm smiles and inviting gazes made him feel like the center of everything. Zach relished the attention. Everything felt effortless, offering a life without consequences or limits. But the riches couldn't last. The coins that once flowed easily through Zach's hands were gone, and the vibrant city nights, once filled with laughter, grew quiet. The friends who had surrounded him disappeared. The life he had chased had slipped through his fingers, leaving him with nothing but regret and the hollow realization of how far he had fallen. Alone, with an empty wallet, he stood frozen in time, as painful memories flooded back to him. He recalled the desperation that drove him to beg for help, seeking out those he had once celebrated with, but the warmth he had known had turned cold, and the hands that once welcomed him were now closed. As he wandered the streets, the once vibrant city felt distant and unwelcoming. He searched for familiar faces, but each rejection cut deeper. Soon it wasn't just indifference he faced. He was chased away from places he once thought he belonged. The laughter and friendship that had surrounded him had vanished, and he realized how shallow his new friendships had been. He had trusted these new friends, unable to understand how they could abandon him so easily. The angry shouts grew closer, and a hard shove sent him crashing to the ground. Finally realizing how empty the life he had chased truly was. Alone and broken, Zach realized the life he had built was as short-lived as the fortune he had squandered. His dream of a new life was slipping away faster than he could grasp, leaving only the heavy weight of regret and desolation. With nothing left and nowhere to go, Zach wandered aimlessly through foreign lands, his once proud steps now slow and weary. Now standing amongst the filth of the pig pen, Zach recalled the famine that had compounded his downfall with painful clarity. It had spread like a curse over the land, devouring everything in its path. Once bustling markets were empty. Food became scarce, and desperation filled the streets. But the famine spared no one. The world, once full of excitement and promise, had become as barren as the soil beneath his feet. Desperate and starving, he reached for the pig's food. And as he swallowed, a painful realization struck him. Even his father's servants lived better than this. They had more than enough to eat while he was perishing from hunger, leaving him with nothing but the sharp sting of regret. Zach's heart broke, and he saw with painful clarity the mistake he had made. A deep longing for his father's love and the home he had left consumed him. With a heavy heart, Zach began his journey home, the ache of regret deepening with every step. Filled with shame, he knew he had sinned against both heaven and his father, and felt unworthy to be called his son. Yet a faint hope remained, that his father might show him mercy, perhaps allowing him to be one of his servants. He clung to the belief that his father's love could reach him once more, offering a grace he could never earn. As Zach neared home, the familiar sight filled him with both hope and fear. Back at home, his father would find himself at the edge of the fields, his eyes scanning the horizon. His heart ached with a longing that never seemed to fade, and it had become his habit to search for any sign of his youngest son. And then, one unexpected evening, he noticed a distant figure. His heart raced as the figure drew nearer, and then he recognized him. Overcome with joy, the father praised God. He ran to meet his son, filled with gratitude for his safe return. But from a distance, Zach hesitated. As he saw his father drawing near, his head lowered in shame, and he began his confession. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." His voice trembled, his heart crying out for mercy. But seeing his father's arms wide open, his face filled with joy, relief washed over him, and he realized the depth of his father's love. The father, hearing his son's repentance, wrapped him in a tight embrace. There were no accusations, no rebukes, only the warmth of a love that welcomed him home. "My son," he whispered, "you were lost, but now you are found. I will restore you as my son, and tonight we will feast and celebrate." With his arm around his son, the father walked him toward the home he had never truly left. In the silence, there was peace, a love that had endured through the darkest times, toward a future of grace and forgiveness. From a distance, the elder son saw his father walking with Zach, the brother who had abandoned them. A quiet resentment stirred within him. After all Zach had done, leaving them and squandering everything, how could he be welcomed back so easily? The elder son had remained loyal, working hard every day, while Zach had wasted his inheritance. Yet here he was, being embraced as if nothing had happened. The unfairness stung, and the resentment grew. He felt the injustice burning inside him. He had sacrificed, worked hard, stayed loyal, yet here was his brother, being embraced as if nothing had happened. The elder son's anger grew with each step he took, feeling the weight of bitterness settle deeper in his chest. Yet now it seemed his loyalty and sacrifices were overshadowed, forgotten in the overwhelming joy of his brother's return. Despite knowing the elder son's anger, the father's heart was filled with joy. Without hesitation, he called for a feast, a celebration of life restored and love renewed. And in this moment, the joy of reunion outweighed all else. His son, who was once dead to him, was alive again. He was lost, and now he was found. But soon he noticed his elder son was nowhere to be found. Concerned, he left the festivities behind and began searching the grounds. There was no sign of him. Growing more worried, he searched high and low, until finally he saw his elder son sitting alone, his posture tense and his face clouded with frustration. The father gently reminded him that everything he had was already his. He hoped his son could look beyond the past and embrace the joy of love and restoration. Soon, the father's words sank in, and the elder son began to understand. The celebration wasn't just about his brother, it was about redemption, a love that never gave up. He no longer saw a reckless brother, but someone who had been lost and found his way home. As the celebration continued, the two brothers stood face to face. Seeing his younger brother humbled and changed, the elder son felt his resentment fade. Their father's love had healed the divide between them. Without a word, they nodded in understanding. The weight of the past lifted. In that quiet exchange, they clasped each other's shoulders, and the unspoken forgiveness restored the bond of their family. Zach raised his cup, his heart filled with gratitude as he stood surrounded by family who welcomed him with love. The peace he had longed for was finally his. Alone beneath the vast night sky, Zach looked up at the stars, each one like a distant memory of his journey. But now his heart was filled not with regret, but with the depth of his father's love. He saw that this love reflected something greater, the boundless love of God, constant and unchanging, patiently waiting for us to find peace in the Father's heart, where there is no condemnation, only restoration and the joy of being found again. Gazing into the heavens, Zach marveled at the beauty, mystery, and endlessness of God's love reflected in the stars and the forgiveness he had been shown. He now knew he was truly home, not just with his father, but in the embrace of God's love that stretched far beyond the sky. The story of the prodigal son reveals a deeper truth. It's not just about the lost being found. It's a reflection of God, the Father's true character and his embracing love. Even at our lowest, feeling unworthy, The Father's heart beats with unshaken love, waiting for us to return. He doesn't wait for us to be perfect. He runs to meet us, arms wide open, the moment we turn towards Him. But there's an even deeper truth. God's love isn't only about welcoming us back, it's also about honoring our freedom. Though it pains Him, He allows us to experience life apart from Him, respecting our choices. As He watches, He hopes we'll come to understand the emptiness of those choices and recognize that true joy and peace can only be found in His protective presence, love, and care.